start. And I think we're good.
That sounds positive.
Okay. Okay. Hi, everyone. On behalf of the PFA, myself and Megan Kupchak, welcome to our very last parent meeting. I feel like it was a few months ago that we had our first Zoom meeting freshman year. And now it seems fitting that we end up on Zoom once again, just to tie it all up. One piece of business before we start with our speakers. In a couple weeks' time is our prom and the post-prom, and we are still in desperate need of volunteers. And it's a huge, fun party for everyone. The whole class goes, but we do need an army to make this happen. So if you haven't volunteered yet, there's a sign up genius. If you don't know where it is, just shoot me an email or a text and I'll get it to you. Look for more in the PFA newsletters that go out. But everything you can cover. If you can't be there that night, you can do setup 2 days before. You can do cleanup the next morning. And if you're there that night, you can even do fun things like deal poker, and there's a million jobs. So we hope to see you then, and just let us know if you have any questions. Now on to why we're all here tonight. We have two amazing speakers that are going to help us and our kids through the first year of college. Both have volunteered their time to be here tonight. And our first speaker is Dr. James Geisler. I'm going to read his bio. It's very impressive, and I can't ad-lib this. Dr. James Geisler, PhD, NCC, LPC, is a leader in the higher education sector, currently serving as an executive director of wellness services here in Fairfield County. Dr. Geisler has built a reputation for innovative leadership and a deep understanding of the mental health challenges faced by students today. In 2024, Dr. Geisler authored Thrive Year One, the Essential Mental Health Workbook for first-year college students, a groundbreaking resource designed to equip college students not only for academic success, but for the broader challenges of life. Dr. Geisler is confident that this book will serve as an essential guide for students, preparing the next generation for a fulfilling and balanced college experience and beyond. So Dr. Geisler is going to speak first, and then after that, our own New Canaan, Jerry Gertzen, is going to speak from a legal side of things. I will read his bio just before he starts. Dr. Geisler?
Thank you, Meg. Pleasure to be here, everyone. I'm going to share my screen for a PowerPoint that I have to kind of help keep me on track. Can you all see this? A little thumbs up.
Yes.
We're good? All right. Thanks, Meg. So I'll just briefly talk. I'll start a little bit of a timer here again to keep me on track and to respect Jerry's time as well. But I'll go over a little bit about the National College Mental Health and why it's important to talk about this. I started my career in a college counseling center in 2013. Hard to believe it was 12 years ago. But when I ended and graduated in 2014 from that practicum experience and onto the field, this is the 10-year difference of mental health issues. Certainly they're on the rise. Most parents have heard the term the mental health crisis that's plaguing college campuses nationwide. And this is really what they're referring to, the rise in mental health issues, the demand for services, the shortage of counselors, and the long wait list. So a lot of my work is getting in front of ways in which we can prevent this. I really believe that we can prevent the so-called mental health crisis. And this is just a glimpse of some of the issues and how they've risen over the years with the large sample size of 104,000 students across universities. So this is not a small sample size, nor is it influenced by a certain set of colleges or a section of the country. We have to understand that student mental health and why it's important to talk about is because it's directly related to academic performance. I won't go through the data. You can see yourselves. Over 1 in 5 students say that their mental health impacts their academic performance 6 days or more. I see that every day. I oversee mental health for 11,000 students and have in this role for the past 5 years. So you can imagine the intersection between mental health and academics. We want students to be successful upon college, but in order to do so, they have to be well. Um, it's also important to note the Healthy Minds data, where this all comes from, uses the flourishing scale to assess for positive mental health. Positive mental health is a student's belief about the quality of their relationships, their self-esteem, their purpose in life, and how optimistic they are about the future. Back in 2014, 10 years ago, just over half, so 51% of students met the threshold for having positive mental health. That number is down to only 38% of the general population of students. So certainly an issue we need to talk about. And just to kind of zoom in a little bit lower, this data comes out of Penn State. What you're seeing right here is all the issues that bring students into a college counseling center. Most parents believe it's usually academics or maybe identity issues that bring students into college counseling center. Things have drastically changed over the years. Students have the option between identifying their top concern that brings them into a college counseling center versus having the option to check all that apply. It shouldn't be surprising that anxiety kind of takes the cake here. Students are anxious and anxiety has been on the rise, but anxiety, stress, depression, family issues, and academic performance are the top 5 issues that students are grappling with. Once again, this is a large sample. This is over 200,000 students in our country across 1.2 million sessions. So just wanted to offer a glimpse of why this is so important to talk about and why we really need to start the conversations now as students transition to college. Let's zoom in a little bit more. What are first year students specifically struggling with? There are 3 things and themes that students come in with in the first like 3 weeks of their first year experience. The first one is this quote that everyone's having a better time than me. It seems like every other student comes in really suffering with something along these lines. And what's the culprit here? Social media, right? Their friends are going off to college. They're seeing these pictures and summarizing their experiences as a really great time, this peak pinnacle experience. And when that's contrasted to their experience, which may be short of that glorious picture, they may sum it up that everyone is having a better time. They may feel like they're doing college wrong or that they chose the wrong university. And it's that's bringing students into our center in the first few weeks. But it's also this quote of, I shouldn't be struggling as much as I am. This is supposed to be a great time. And that's really heavily influenced by this narrative that college is the best 4 years of your life, right? That narrative that's influenced by hindsight bias, by students who have graduated and are juxtaposed to their adult life, as students say, adulting. Um, we talk about college and build it up as this peak experience, but we don't often talk about the struggles as much. It's a really unique transition, and students who feel like college was really built up and who are on campus finding it really difficult often find that maybe I'm doing college wrong once again. So these 2 factors right here alone contribute to feelings of loneliness, isolation, depression, and anxiety. And certainly that exacerbated homesickness. And then lastly, a lot of students come with this pressure that they're going to meet their best friend. It's hard to know where this narrative comes from. A lot of parents feel like they put the pressure on students by talking about their relationships in college. I don't know what the culprit is here, but a lot of students feel that pressure to make their best friend or next best friend right away, or even become best friends with their roommates. We certainly see the cultural shift now with like roommate selection and third-party applications that have students meet together to form those relationships. And sometimes they're good, but sometimes they're not. This is just a broader view of what students are really struggling with. First and foremost, independence. A lot of students struggle just to make appointments. That could be academic appointments, it could be social appointments, and it could be mental health appointments. They struggle with advocating for themselves and what we call making the attempt. And what I mean by that is a lot of students who are struggling with loneliness or disconnection come to the counseling center really hoping that they're finding relationships on campus, and yet they're kind of expecting their best friend to walk through the door any second, and they're not being proactive about doing those things. So it's a lot of what students want and yet really struggle to initiate those interactions. A lot of interpersonal issues bring students to the counseling center, whether that's communication issues with roommates and peers, conflict management, you name it. But more and more, we're seeing loneliness and isolation. And if you ask me what the number one issue that college students saw in the counseling center last year, it was, I'm struggling to make friends. Okay, so that's really tough. I think the biggest surprise for parents is that they could have been really social in high school. Like my son or daughter was super gregarious. They were like, their superlative was the most popular. They had tons of friends. They went to like sleepaway camp every summer. They had a lot of diverse experiences, but there's a reality here, and that it's been a long time for most of these kids being the new fish or the new kid around the block or small fish in a big pond, right? They struggle to initiate those conversations and make friends all over again. And if you think about it, they've had a pretty good safety net of social relationships throughout their life, right? To safeguard them from a lot of these things. So, um, students struggle with self-awareness. I'm going to talk about why self-awareness is particularly important. And a lot of college students, especially in that first year, really struggle with failure. And what I mean by that is that parents and students don't often talk about what does it mean to be successful in college, but also what does it mean to fail? What does failure look like? And it's not a normal conversation to have, right? We don't think of that as like an organic, easy conversation to have with students. And so what happens is students fill in the blank, right? Some students may land here, they feel like they're not making friends right away. And so they sum that up as like, I feel like I'm letting my parents down. I feel like I'm failing, and I feel like I'm failing them. It could be students who are getting C's in classes they would have never gotten a C in, right? Maybe they were straight A in high school, but now they're taking more diverse coursework. Um, it's required for their major, but they don't feel like it pertains to it. And so that those average grades kind of create this average student mindset where students feel like they're failing. But what they haven't done is they haven't negotiated what does failing mean. We often talk with students like, do you think your parents, if they were here right now, do you think they'd say you're failing? And most of the time they say no. So it's interesting how they fill in the blank. Something that we don't want to do. We want to create conversations about failure and success with students. Students really struggle to be honest and transparent. All right. Most parents think I have a great relationship with my student. Most students have great relationships with their parents. Most students who struggle to be transparent and honest have the best relationship with their parents. So if parents are saying they have a really good relationship with their kids and they're always honest and transparent, those are students I'm actually a little more worried about, because what happens is students love their parents and they want to protect them and safeguard them. And so when they're really struggling, they don't want to let their parents know, right? College has been built up. Everybody knows, my family members know, my neighbors know, my parents, have really supported this big thing. We've built it up so much, and I feel like it's not the experience that I wanted. And so I'm going to tell them that I'm doing really well, even when I'm not. So it's important for parents to talk with students about their feelings and normalizing the fact that the transition's difficult and they want to know when they're not doing well. Because most counseling centers are and the counselors in the counseling centers are the first people to find out when a student's struggling. It's not the parents. And so that's hard with confidentiality. Once they turn 18, you're not getting a call from the counselor in the counseling center saying, hey, your son or daughter is struggling. Unless there's a release of information with that student signing that form for parents, you're not going to be knowing whether or not they're in a college counseling center. So parents ask me all the time at orientation, can I sign a release of information? And my answer is always that we'll dust off the releases of information at the start of each year, but there has not been a student this academic year who's signing that release, and I can't remember the last time a student has. Sometimes parents want to talk to the counselor more than the student, and sometimes students see this autonomous experience as like, we saw the top 5 issues as family issues. They don't want a counselor talking to their parents. So that's really hard. We are partners in that. We really encourage students to talk to their parents, and how we can build that bridge is really important to us. But we also understand this is their experience. And as much as we try to lead them in that direction, they ultimately have the choice of talking to their parents or not. But it is encouraged. We're on your side, parents. I'm a parent myself. Parents always get the first half hour of my morning to answer voicemails and emails. So I take it very seriously. Students really struggle with expectations versus reality. What I mean by that is the mental health support in college looks very different. The average ratio of students to hired counselors in our country is 1,500 students per hired counselor in a counseling center. Okay. That is a large ratio. So when I was in a conference in January, I was talking with another director who was in a college in the Midwest, and the ratio was 5,000 students per counselor. So they had 5 counselors for 25,000 students. So students who think they're going to get those weekly counseling appointments may not be always be the case. Those counseling centers now are really struggling with long wait lists, and maybe they'll only see you if you're in a state of crisis. So the best thing you can do is to be an informed consumer and find out what the mental health support looks like at your university. There are barriers for those who want to go across state lines. So maybe they had a therapist they're working really well with, and they have them back home, and you're saying, okay, let's set that up virtually when they're at school. Sometimes they're not able to do that because of state guidelines. Maybe they can't bill insurance. So the conversation really should start now with that therapist. If they're planning to go to school, out of state lines and they want to maintain that therapist and have that weekly support, for example, that's often what students have when they're meeting with a therapist in the community. My recommendation is have that conversation. What does that look like? Some therapists will say, I'll meet with you, but I can't bill insurance. You could pay out of pocket. We have that happen too. So it really is all dependent on the therapist and their level of comfort. Students struggle with the academic expectations, to say the least. It's a different beast in college, right? They're exposed to different coursework. The stress is different, the structure is different, and that's where students really struggle is with the structure. It is not uncommon. You saw the statistics of students suffering with depression that's nearly doubled in the past decade. To come into the counseling center and say, I spend, 5 to 6 hours a day on social media, on TikTok, on Instagram, and I can't seem to get off of it. A lot of parents are confident that their kid's not going to be that kid who's going to have a lack of structure. But don't forget what college is. A few classes on Monday, maybe a class on Wednesday, a couple classes on Friday. They're really spaced out. And it's hard for students to find that balance. And that's what I write about in my book. And that's what I try to promote is to have students think about that structure now. Because without it, they have their cell phones in their hands, they've got their TVs, they've got social time, and it's really hard to find that balance, just naturally so. So that's what students are struggling with. On the parent side of things, they certainly often overestimate the student's ability to do a number of things. And the first is that a lot of parents want to believe that their students are going to advocate for what they need, whether that's on the side of mental health or academics. But it's not uncommon for academics and professors to see that, wait a second, this student is really struggling. They've never asked for help before, and yet we could tell by their grades. How can we catch them in time? I'm a member of our student care team on our university campus. So that opportunity for me is a great time to get ahead of it, try to find students who are maybe missing excessively their classes and how we can maybe have a couple systems talking so I could reach out to those students and catch them early. But we want students to advocate for what they need. Parents also believe that students will schedule their own appointments, they'll have autonomy, they'll have independence, they'll make friends, they'll go out and be proactive, they'll express their emotions, they'll be vulnerable, they can handle conflict, those interpersonal things that we talked about, and the boundary work, and they'll implement that structure that I referenced earlier. But lastly, that they also believe that, if they're struggling, don't worry, we have a close relationship. They'll come to me and talk to me about their mental health. And what I always challenge parents when they make these statements is like, how often do they do that now? Right? How often do we give students this level of independence and autonomy? And it's not to poke fun at parents at all, but sometimes we expect students to do things that they're not doing now. That somehow magically, the second we drop them off on a college campus, they're going to be super proactive and schedule their own appointments. And I always joke with parents, like it's not uncommon for students to call the counseling center and they leave these long voicemails and then they can't tell us that they even want an appointment or even leave their name and they just hang up the phone, right? Students are handing parents their forms for immunizations as I'm telling them to promote independence. And they're like, yeah, we'll promote independence. And then they're scheduling their doctor's appointments to get their immunizations for college, right? And it's like, we have to give students these opportunities now. What are we doing on a daily, weekly basis to give students that independence and autonomy? They're going to have immunization requirements for college. They're going to maybe even have to have a physical. Students should start right there scheduling those appointments and attending those appointments, but you can't expect them to do it at school if they're not doing it at home. Um, being vulnerable. Have they ever gone to somebody and asked for help? We want them to talk to us about their mental health, but what do we do about it now? How can we normalize those conversations? Because what happens is when we create that distance, that fear and anxiety about like, talking to your parent about mental health increases, right? It doesn't decrease by separation. And so if they're not talking about mental health now, creating more separation from it's definitely not going to happen. And we want it to. That's the goal, is to prevent these. This is a visual that I created to help parents understand the importance of not just knowing the resources, but the requirements, the prerequisites of accessing them. So if we look here on the bottom of awareness of resources, most parents will tell students, do you know where the counseling center is? Do you know where the mental health support is on campus? Do you know who to go to? And students will agreeably say, yes, that's great. And parents will kind of like wipe their hands clean of like, they know where it is, they know where to go to ask for help. But I wish it was that easy. There's a long road between awareness of resources and actually accessing them. First of all, students have to have that self-awareness, right? That they're struggling in the first place. There's no way they're going to access help if they don't have that self-awareness first, right? So knowing about resources is awesome. We want students to have that, but they have to have that self-awareness too. They're like, wait a second, I'm struggling right now. It's really hard for students with anxiety, which is tough. 65% of students of those 1.2 million sessions, they're coming to a counseling center with some level of anxiety. Well, what's the number one symptom associated with anxiety? Avoidance. So when students are anxious about their math class and they don't understand the material, so they stop going to math class, which is not uncommon, right? If you ask them, how are you doing? They'll say, I'm great. Well, of course they're great, right? They're not showing up to class, so they don't have to be anxious, right? And that's really hard because it decreases their opportunity to be self-aware. Not only do they need to be self-aware of what's going on with them mentally and emotionally, they need to understand that there's a certain threshold where they can't do it alone. Every single one of us has a threshold of this need to say, you know what? I'm really struggling right now and I can't forge through anymore. I have to ask for help. That could be academic help, that could be mental health support, right? That I need to go talk to a counselor or I need to reach out to somebody. And then lastly, before we get to accessing resources, is the utilization of help seeking skills. And that's kind of like a two-prong approach. First, students can be really good at being vulnerable. So maybe they make their way all the way up this triangle. They're self-aware. They're aware that they can't do this on their own. And now I'm ready to go ask for help. It's not uncommon for students to email faculty members with this long email of why they're struggling, right? But what they miss is what they need from the professor. Is it understanding? Is it grade forgiveness? Is it an extension on an upcoming exam? What is it? And most students fail to reach that vulnerability with purpose. So they could be really good at vulnerability, but less good with vulnerability with purpose. It's the example of calling up and leaving a voicemail about how much they're suffering and forgetting to even schedule an appointment, what they need from the counseling center. Is it more information about services? Is it to schedule an intake? Is it to schedule an appointment that day? Do they need something more urgent? So I always say this is a great opportunity to take a screenshot or to take a picture. I really want this visual to stay out of the prerequisites that lead to accessing resources. And then students have to go. It's not uncommon for the students with their very first intake appointment to not show. Why? Because it takes a lot to even make that attempt, right? To call up the counseling center and say that they need help, or call up that academic resource and schedule a tutoring appointment, but then feel like, I'm a little gun shy, I'm anxious. That requires a level of vulnerability too, and they shy away. And maybe they need to come back at a time where they just have more confidence. So the more that we can do right now to build out self-awareness and get students into helping resources is going to ultimately lead to academic success. And that's really what I want for all students. So that's why I really published this book. It's everything that in this book is what students are struggling with now. So I condensed 16,000 sessions that I've overseen into 14 chapters. We want students to become self-aware. We want them to be resilient, understand the impact that social media has in college and how to implement those interpersonal skills and communication and boundaries and all those aspects before they launch into college. Um, so many people talk about this mental health crisis, but it's reversible and it's preventable by giving students actionable skills. So I put a QR code there and I'll share my contact information at the end, but it's really interesting to see how this book has taken off and developed a life of its own. We have students doing it right now. We have several universities requiring their first year students to do it, which is great to kind of create that culture at the university of doing it. Parents have created it in tandem with their student. It is a workbook, so parents are doing it at the same time students are. Some parents are saying, listen, James, my kids, no way they're going to do that, but I bought the book and now it's changing the way I'm having my dinner conversations with my student. That's the flexible nature of the resource, but the reason I developed it is because I just want to change this trajectory of student mental health. So another opportunity for a screenshot, so you don't lose this, but if I can give top tips for parents and why the issues that students struggle with are currently the way they are, is we can be doing things right now to better improve student mental health. And the first is that we need to challenge the narrative that college is the best 4 years of your life. When I speak at orientation, I ask parents, how many of you talk about this narrative? Most every parent raises their hand, and then I ask them, keep your hand up if college was actually the best 4 years of your life, and 90% put it down. So we recycle a lot of narratives, but we don't understand the impact that it has on student mental health. And this is certainly one of them. It's never too soon to talk about mental health. There's more than just the mental health support. There's multiple resources on campus, almost too many. If you could walk away with one thing, it's inquiring about tuition insurance. Most all schools have partnered with a tuition insurance agency. Most parents don't realize what tuition insurance is, and some parents have gone all 4 years without ever purchasing or even knowing about it. Tuition insurance is there if your student needs to take a medical leave of absence. So if they're struggling with their mental health, most all schools pass week 5. There's no reimbursement coming home. So think about that tuition bill. You pay tuition. Week 5 goes by and your student needs to leave school because they can no longer function. There's no money coming back home. So with tuition insurance, it will cover tuition. It often doesn't count meal plans or housing, but that's a good chunk of change. And why it's important is because the requirement for a student to come back to that institution is that they have to go to treatment. And sometimes that treatment is costly. So the money you would have spent on tuition goes right back into your wallet. And it's really only about 2 or 3% of tuition. I understand it's like one last bill to pay, but it often is one of the most important. And I would say about 95 to 97% of parents that I work with have never purchased it. And so it's really meeting with them where they're at and figuring out how I could support them. Incentivize your student to complete Thrive Year One. Talk about free pre-fall programs for mental health. If your student's really anxious or nervous about going to college and you feel like getting them into their major with people who are they're going to attend classes with a week early, those pre-fall programs have such an added benefit to student acclimation and mental health. So I couldn't support them anymore. But lastly, homesickness, every parent asks, should I pick them up or not? When it comes to anxiety and students having a hard time, we want to normalize homesickness. What I recommend to all parents is don't pull them out. A lot of students will call you up at 2 o'clock in the morning and say, I need to get picked up right now. Bring me home. What happens is when parents take them home, they remove them from that anxiety provoking environment. And sometimes that alone communicates that college is scary or uncomfortable, and it's harder to get that student back. Best thing you could do is visit your student, make them feel comfortable, make them remind them of the comfort of home, but you go to them and get them through that tough time and try to resist taking them home. But you need to have that conversation with students. It's important to do that. Schedule checkpoints throughout the semester as well. Listen, we're going to talk before maybe October starts and just talk about your first month, and then, even before Thanksgiving break, and then while you're home, just so I can have these checkpoints of talking to you about your mental health and how you're doing academically, socially, etc. And last but not least, college is their experience, not yours. Sometimes we have that pressure to want to relive our own experience by encouraging them to do things because we want to relive that. Students feel a lot of pressure sometimes from their parents that they want to be in all these organizations that their parents were in or had a part in, but it ultimately is their time, and encourage them, lead them, promote that autonomy and independence, and also be there to support them along the way. But there's so much that we can do right now. And I'm just going to stop share right now and see if there's any questions that folks want to put in the chat, and just being sensitive to Jerry's time.
Dr. Geisler, one question came up. Um, your presentation is excellent and filled with great information. We were wondering if we could have a copy of that and put that on our website.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll give a condensed version. Yeah, the one that I used tonight, for sure.
Right. That would be great.
And maybe while I answer questions, I can always just put my contact information up here too.
Perfect.
I'll take a look at the chat. Are there any questions that parents have? Oh, reshare the book. Yeah, if you take oh, someone had messaged me. I'm gonna go to the slide with the book. Some people are asking for the QR code for the book. It's on Amazon, Thrive Year One. There's a website, thriveyear1.com, thriveyear1 at Gmail. So make it super easy to learn a little bit more about the book. There was a short film that was made about it, and I've done public speaking events throughout this spring semester. And it's been a wild ride since this was published. It's been great to support students and parents. So any other questions, Meg, that you're seeing on your end?
No, nothing has popped up. So I think maybe you've just done such a complete presentation. You've answered all our questions already.
I hope that's the case.
Okay. Well, Dr. Keisley, thank you so much for spending your evening with us. And this is very helpful, and we appreciate you volunteering your time.
Thank you. And thanks for having me, everyone. Take good care.
Bye.
Bye.
And then next up, we have Jerry Gertston. And his bio, he has practice concentrations in the fields of estate planning, probate, and administration of estates. In 1991, he opened his Manhattan law office, the law offices of Gerard Gertston, and I'm sorry, I keep stumbling over the name. In 2011, he also joined the firm of Lampert, Toohey, and Rucci, based here in New Canaan. as an of counsel partner where he runs the wills, trusts, and estates practice. He is admitted to practice law in New York, Connecticut, and Texas.
Great. Thank you, Meg. It's a great presentation by James. It's a good segue into, I think, what I'm going to talk about for a few minutes here, which is on the more legal side of things, of course. I think what I'll do is, again, just further background. I've got two daughters, K to 12 New Canaan students. One's a senior now at Villanova University, other's a junior at Lehigh. So I've been through this. I know what it's like to go through transitioning your children from being high school students into college students. I feel for you, and I'm with you. So feel free to answer any questions in connection with any of my personal, experiences there too. Again, 35 years of doing this, and what we're about to talk about connects to what I do. It's trust and estates work, but we also help clients with what we call ancillary documents to the trusts and estates, the trust wills and estates that we do. And these ancillary documents are the power of attorneys, the healthcare documents, and here for the children, it will be a FERPA waiver. And I think maybe it's best just to start by talking about the healthcare documents. We've got the HIPAA regulations in place. It's the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, federal rule that protects the privacy of medical records and information. Doctors, medical facilities are not permitted to disclose any information about patients without their permission. Age of majority for the federal HIPAA rules is 18. So once your child attains the age of 18, you're no longer allowed to demand information, collect information from the medical providers without your child's consent. I think right here, what I'll do is I'll just take it over to the documents that Connecticut uses, since we're all Connecticut domiciliaries here, and go through how Connecticut structures statutorily the language and the approach with respect to the various ancillary documents we'll talk about. So what I'll do now is I'll share this screen and just tell me, let's see if we have this open. You tell me if you can see that. Hey, you okay with this? Do you see something called an advance directive?
Yes.
Perfect. Everyone can see that then. Okay, good. So I'll just walk through this. Again, this is the Connecticut statute now speaking to us. They've set up the advance directive with 4 components. The first, again, your child now being of the age of 18, assuming they're 18 now, can sign this. First, and I'll maybe highlight a few things here, appointment of a healthcare representative. This is an agent. This is, we'll get to it down below in a sec. An agent is a person who the principal appoints to help manage their health care if they can't. Next would be a living will. We'll get to that in a sec. That's the street slang for that would be a pull the plug document. Okay. Next, after that, we've got the organ donation section and then an appointment of a conservator. So we'll walk through each one of those 4 components here through the statutory language. You can see how it works. So what we're talking about here now is if the attending physician of a patient, okay, determines that this person is unable to understand and appreciate the nature and consequences of healthcare decisions, and they're unable to reach and communicate an informed decision regarding treatment, the healthcare agent is now authorized to make any and all healthcare decisions for that person, including these various things. Okay, so what we're talking about here is now someone who's been incapacitated, for example. There's a car crash, God forbid. They're not communicative. They cannot speak. The healthcare agent, who is now empowered by the principal having signed this, can step in and help manage that person's healthcare for them with their medical professionals. Without this, the medical professionals are not allowed to speak to you as a parent, even though you're the parents, because now we have an 18-year-old adult in play and we have the HIPAA rules we have to consider. They can't release medical information about the patient. You're going to be stuck. And I have seen it happen. So I think a lot of parents don't understand that, once the child hits 18, they're severed from managing, helping with medical decisions. And that would connect to what James was talking to us about before, which also um, means mental health and therapy, and the information that's gathered by those professionals in that sector as well. So here you'll see now that this principal, the person signing this, here it would be your child, directing the healthcare agents to make decisions on their behalf in accordance with their wishes, as stated in this document, or as otherwise known to the healthcare agent. So if you've had conversations with your child about um, approaches to healthcare, that would be relevant here. Certain things are covered in writing by the principal, having signed this, and I'll get to that in a sec. But there's always that possibility of the principal communicating with the agent as to what their preferred healthcare measures would be under any given circumstance. So it's not a bad idea to start talking about these things with your children. And I think as we get further down into this, we're going to hit the heavier document here that sort of illustrates the point. This is a living will. All right. And this is, again, Connecticut statute speaking. This is not me making language up. It's a living will for healthcare instructions. All right. So here we have the principal, the person signing this, now speaking to everyone, saying that if I am in a terminal condition, all right, I'm incurable, I have an irreversible medical condition, which without the administration of life support systems will, in the opinion of the attending physician, result in death within a relatively short period of time. If the principal is permanently unconscious, coma, persistent vegetative state, irreversible condition, and they're no time aware of themselves or their environment and have no behavioral response to the environment. So this is, like I said before, the street slang would be, this is a pull the plug document. Now, I don't think it's a bad idea to have the children, now that they've attained the age of 18 and they are adults, for legal purposes under the HIPAA rules, to start to consider these things. It's grim, it's difficult, but I think it's just another step in the direction of them understanding that, hey, I'm now an adult and I have to start thinking about these things that are connected to my health. And this is one of them. All right. It's extreme, but I think, again, it illustrates the point. So if that circumstance exists, the principal would decide whether or not to continue life support. And these are the three things that the statute talks about in connection with life support when we're dealing with a person who is in that irreversible permanent condition, coma, right? CPR, you don't want them to perform CPR if that person is having a heart attack to bring them back into the comatose situation. Artificial respiration and artificial means of providing nutrition and hydration. So if those things are to be withheld, the principal will initial these boxes here. Connecticut, a couple years ago, they've clearly ran into an issue. This is newish. If the principal is pregnant, this is when we're dealing with females here, of course. Now, if the female is pregnant, we've got to think about that. Whether pulling the life support would not allow a fetus that would otherwise be viable to reach a live birth. They can opt out of pulling the life support if that fact exists, if that fact pattern exists. So we have a pregnant principal who has decided to withhold life support, but they are pregnant. They can elect here to continue life support if continuing the life support would allow the fetus to reach a live birth. Again, grim stuff. Knock on wood. I haven't seen it for children like this. But again, I think one of the purposes of these sorts of exercises is to get the children to understand that they have to start thinking about things as an adult. And it's also for us too, as parents, to understand that we have to start to let go a little bit and let children understand what these documents mean and why it is they should consider signing them or not. Okay, so we'll move down beyond this then into an organ donation. Again, many of the kids that come in to see me, have already made a decision on their driver's license. We try to keep it consistent. But if they would like to be an organ donor, they would initial here. Um, Designation of a conservator of the person. Again, this is a person, now we're talking about the principal who's no longer able to manage their affairs in connection with their health care, food, etc. A conservator under Connecticut rules is appointed by a judge if those circumstances exist. Um, Now the conservator can step in and help manage that person's care. What I recommend typically is to have the conservator of the person also be named as the healthcare agent to keep things consistent. I go over to New York for a second, where a few years ago, I want to say maybe 5, maybe a little longer, 10 years ago, New York started to take the position that they only want one person to be appointed as the healthcare agent for a principal. Because what was happening was uh, principals would choose 2 people to be their healthcare agents, and then there were disputes between the agents as to how to treat the or what medical treatment to employ for the benefit of the principal, and the doctors were getting caught in the middle. So I would follow through with their guidance and their wisdom on that, and suggest to anyone doing these sorts of documents, including the kids, to name one person, either a parent, mom first, dad second, vice versa, but not 2 at the same time, just to avoid that problem that we've been seeing in New York, which resulted in a change in our statutory approach to things. All right. So there is the healthcare set under the statute, under the Connecticut rules. I get the question, all right, my child is going to be going to college. Well, I'll leave mine as an example. Pennsylvania. These documents are still valid there. There's full faith and credit for these documents within the United States. I also get the question, I have one child now in Europe studying for the semester. One just got back last semester. Are these valid in other countries? Can be a tricky question. I would say the answer is yes. We're dealing with usually friendly countries that our children are visiting for semesters abroad, and yes, I would say that these documents would be honored in the various countries. It would depend, I suppose, on which country we're dealing with here. Um, but generally speaking, I'll answer that yes. If we have a student that's going to study for 4 years, for example, and I do have that too, students come through in a college overseas, I would recommend that we do sets of documents here, do these Connecticut-centric documents and documents that are similar in the country where they're going to be studying for the extended period. Okay. But I think for a semester abroad, these would suffice for almost any purpose, I would say, especially if we're sending children off to friendly countries. Okay, so let me then move over to the power of attorney. I assume we can still see this too, right? Everyone's still there with me on the power? Yeah, durable statutory power. You can see that? Oh, no, you can't.
No.
Okay, let me share again. Hopefully that worked.
Yes.
Okay, power of attorney. Again, this is the statute speaking. This is not me making language up. This is the Connecticut durable statutory power of attorney. May not be relevant for many children because they don't own assets yet. But again, we get into this, I think, pattern of having the children understand that they are now adults. And if they do have assets, or they may come into assets, it's not a bad idea to have someone appointed as what's called their attorney in fact, which is an agent, to help manage their financial affairs if they can't. Okay. And this is what we're talking about now. Connecticut handles it this way. They take the first page and a half here, they take the powers, and they presume that the principal who's signing this wants the agent, the attorney in fact, to have these powers, so there's no need to do anything. I just generally recommend these powers be broad. and not restrictive. So I would have a child come in and not initial or cross out any of these, just to have these powers remain in effect. Okay. And then we move into optional estate planning powers. Many of them are not relevant. I don't have the children or many of my clients sign these because they're just not relevant unless we're dealing with a disability here, for example, something like that. But there are a few things that I do like. Digital devices. I will have clients now on the optional powers here. Okay, these are optional powers. Here, we're going to be initialing things that we would want the agent, the attorney, in fact, to be able to act upon if this person so chooses, if the principal so chooses. One, again, would be the digital devices. This is, we've had a car crash and we need, mom or dad to access an email, for example. That would be one circumstance under which we might want to utilize letter V, Vince of Victor here. So I would have students initial this. The other part of this that I would have the students initial would be W. And we have students going off to school. They're going to be, engaged in intellectual property pursuits, writing things, music. I have a lot of clients in the entertainment business. We all have them initial and sign this W here to allow the attorney, in fact, to manage those sorts of interests if, again, the principal can't. So again, just to review the statutory power, again, the word durable here means that it survives incapacity. So if a principal signs this and later becomes mentally disabled, dementia, or whatever, car crash, this power survives. It is durable. It survives the incapacity. All right. So again, the first set of powers are statutory. I just want them to remain in effect. But then we start initialing the optionals here in V and W. Little things like this, if the child has a pet, the attorney, in fact, can take care of the pets, etc. So there's the second document that I think the adult children should be considering. Now, I always tell them that anytime we do any of these documents, they can change them anytime they'd like. I'll be working for them. I'd be their lawyer. If they want to come in and change things, that's how we do it. We get them in and we change. Triggering event for a change would be a marriage. That would be a classic triggering event. Child gets married and now they want their spouse to act as their agents. All right, I'm going to share again now. Let's see. I'm going to open up the third document that we have the children consider when they come in to see us. All righty. So let me just share this as well. I'm going to share this one. There we go. All right.
Yep.
You can see where it begins Villanova. All right. I just pulled Villanova's FERPA information off of their website here. Let's get to. I had a few notes here on the FERPA. It's not complex. It's not a complex statute. You could see here, it's the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. There are certain things that schools can release about students. If you're a basketball player, you're 6'10", you weigh 300 pounds, they can release that to the public. There's many things that they can't release to the public, though, without the child's consent. Medical records, academic records, et cetera, things like this. And many of the colleges will have this sort of language connected to the FERPA statute posted on their websites. They'll also have the children cycle through parent portals, they'll call them, and various other applications they have to make online to have all these various elections made before they start school. And I would recommend that you take a look at that parent portal probably sooner rather than later. I assume that college application processes are done and all of that, I guess. But if your child has decided upon a college, you might want to start to investigate how their parent portal works to see what information you can obtain without the child's permission. And then if you need the child's permission, the child will elect through the parent portals what you're given access to, what you're allowed access to. All right. So in the FERPA, again, the FERPA also connects to academic records. So they may not, the schools may not release academic records to a parent unless they have I'll call it a de facto waiver. Really what it is a child acknowledging that they are a tax dependent of the parents. And once that's done, the college then can release academic information to the parents. Whether the parent wants to continue to monitor, academic performance and all of that, that's a whole other question. I think that's almost more into what we heard James speak about before, and the notion of having your children now take that next step into adulthood without the parents monitoring every step, looking at every quiz, etc. But maybe that's something that should be discussed with your children as to what the intentions with respect to all of that are. I can tell you just personally, in the beginning, when I had my first go out, having been, a parent here in New Canaan that's, diligent and supportive, and involved, you have a tendency to check the parent portal, if that's what they still call it, and things like this, just to see how things are going. But I noticed then when my children started college, me as a parent, I just started to back off of checking up on them on everything that they were doing academically. I wanted to see who the teachers were. I'm paying for this, who are their professors. I was interested, and then all of a sudden, for me, that started to just fade away a little bit, for whatever that's worth to those listening. There are times, however, when you might want to get in there and help a child out with something related to academics that would require that permission to be given in order for you to access the records. So um, again, there's optionality there through the parent portals. I would suggest looking at the school's protocol on those sorts of things. Talk to the children about how involved they want you to be with what's being offered. And I think that would be a good start. Um, it happens quickly. I'll say that I remember, times when, I was surprised that the kids wouldn't tell me they went to town. Now I've got my children, visiting, Prague, and I have no idea they're there. They don't tell me because they're out there doing it. It happens quickly, where all of a sudden that break between, the parent that's overseeing all of these sorts of things for them, well, it breaks, and there's a transition that happens. And I think being in college certainly accelerates it, which is a good thing, I think, for the most part. But it does happen quickly, so I would just say brace yourselves. Um, let's see. The other thing that we do talk about with the children is, God forbid they're ever swept up in any kind of trouble or anything like this. It does happen. College, it's college, things happen. I give the same advice that your auto insurance company would give you if you were in a car accident. Never admit you did anything wrong. If there's someone pressing you to admit that you've done something, don't talk to them. Tell them you have a lawyer and that you're not answering any questions. Always, I think, better to handle things that way. Less said, the better. That's just me as a lawyer talking. But I think it applies to those sorts of scenarios where, God forbid, there might be some trouble. And, the kids are in, we talk about that. They can call me if there's ever an issue. I can place them with local counsel, God forbid, if we ever need it. We do go over how to access or how to engage on cell phones, the medical emergency contacts, because I have seen this used. I had a client a few months ago saving a life at an airport, doing CPR. Medics show up, they break out the iPhone. There's a way, and I usually show the kids how to do it. It's easy to figure out. You just Google it. Medics will press two buttons on the phone that will open up a medical ID slider. And once that's connected to their contact and their agent, their healthcare agent, the medical professionals can then call the appointee, the healthcare agent, directly without having to access the phone. Things like this, the logistics of getting from the documents, explaining it to the children, into how do we actually use it. So once those documents are done, the children usually give us permission to scan them over and provide them to the parents as well. So everyone's got a set. right? We always scan in the documents separately. So if the child wants to send the healthcare documents to their nurse's office at the school, they can do that without the nurse having to see the power of attorney and the FERPA, for example. If they want the registrar's office to have a copy of the FERPA, they can do that separately. So we have a protocol in place here at my office where we help the kids through and the parents through getting the documents executed, getting the documents into the hands of who needs it, and working through the logistics of what happens if, God forbid, we need to use them at some point. Okay. I think with that, that covers the three basic documents that we consider the children consider executing when they come see us. And I think I can maybe stop my share and open it up to any questions at this point.
Thank you, Jerry. We do have quite a few questions
Sure.
through the chat. Would you like me to read them?
Yeah, let's go.
Okay. My son will be 17 when he heads to college. Can he sign a directive this summer at age 17 for use when he is 18, a few weeks after arriving at college?
It's a good question. No, I think Connecticut's rules with respect to executing these sorts of things really triggers at 18. All right. So what we recommend is we get the documents ready. And when the child comes back for a break, for example, they're going to come back for Thanksgiving or whatever, we'll get them in here. It happens all the time. We get them in here and we execute all the documents. Then usually we'll do it here in the office with witnesses and a notary. So we have to wait until the child's 18. They're 17 now. The parents still have the right to access medical records, right? If they need to, without these permissions being given. So you're still protected that way as a result of the child being a minor.
Right. Is a Connecticut advance directive enforceable in other states if the student goes to school out of state, or should the student execute a separate advance directive under the other state's requirements?
That's a good question. There's full faith and credit between the states with respect to these documents that are executed. So, like I mentioned before, my children are in Pennsylvania. If we need to use these documents there, any Pennsylvania medical professionals, authorities, schools will honor them. So there's full faith and credit between the states.
If these forms are not filled out, would parents be agents by default if our child is not married?
No, it's got nothing to do with marriage. It's got to do with age. We're talking about now the HIPAA rules. This is a federal rule that says once a person hits age 18, medical records are no longer allowed to be provided to anyone, any third party, unless that person gives consent. Now, if you have let's say there was a car crash, God forbid, right? But the child is coherent, they're speaking, and they want the parent to engage the doctors with them in making medical decisions. They'll just say to the doctor, okay, talk to my parents, it's okay, right? That's fine. These documents, the healthcare documents, the agency forms and things that we're talking about here really kick in when we're dealing with a child that is not able to communicate. And that decision is made by an attending physician. And at that point, these documents will be effective and the parent can step in and then start to work with doctors and access medical records to make healthcare decisions. Okay.
How do we go about getting these forms signed? What are the costs involved?
All right. Well, what we do here is I'll read to you my assistant's phone number, direct dial. She's the one that usually helps me with the scheduling, if that's okay. And yeah, let me start with that. All right. Her name is Romani, Romanie, and her direct dial here in the New Canaan office, we do these out of the New Canaan office, of course, is 203-343-0094. Again, that's 203-343-0094. What I do on the fees is I cover my costs basically. Typically I charge, $900 for all these various things when I'm talking to, clients about these things. I knock it down in half to $450 for students. So that's how I've been doing it over the years. I think I've been doing this now. I've been giving these talks for about six years or so. And that's how I've been handling it for the kids.
Can a child opt to designate someone other than their parent as the agent? For example, a grandparent or a family friend. Are there any limitations around this?
There are no limitations on that. except that the person you want to, that you're looking to appoint obviously has to be, mentally capable of handling it. I mean, that goes without saying, I think. But there's no degree of family connection that's required. They can name a friend, they can name a grandparent, that was mentioned, a niece, a nephew, whoever it is, so long as they're over the age of 18, they're otherwise qualified. There's no restriction as to who they must name.
Will an advance directive be valid permanently, or are there any circumstances, events that can cause the document to become invalid or need to be re-executed?
These documents are durable. They survive in capacity. The one event that would result in a change is if the principal, the person signing the document, here will be the child, comes in, sees me and says, I want to make a change. And then they can either revoke the documents altogether and not have them at all if they don't want them, or they can just switch out their appointees or their elections with respect to the living will, for example, things like that.
Great. And then I think the last question has to do with when you mentioned the parent portal of different schools.
Yes.
Are all these forms available in the parent portal that was mentioned? Are these specific to each college?
Look at it this way. Your children are Connecticut domiciliaries. So I generally recommend that the documents be executed under the rules and the laws where the principal is domiciled, which is here in Connecticut. Now, there may be some documents in the parent portal available. One I can think of would be the FERPA waiver that I just mentioned, right? Like I go to my oldest daughter at Villanova. I think um, we had her sign the FERPA waiver with me, and she just forgot to do it. She wanted to do it, but she forgot. And I sent the FERPA waiver that I had to Villanova, and it worked. So the FERPA probably, yes, in the parent portal. I would not think that the parent portals would offer illegal documents like healthcare agency forms that we're looking at here, because there are legal considerations here that you have to think about. In addition to the obviously the healthcare considerations, et cetera, or financial considerations you have to consider when you're doing a power of attorney that I don't think the colleges are going to get involved with. They don't want to mess with legal documents really, and suggesting even implicitly by offering documents through a parent portal that these are okay to sign, right? So FERPA waiver is one thing, that's one animal. That's probably something that's simple enough for the colleges to offer. Most of them probably do. But if they come to see me, I'm going to have them do it anyway. Um, but I don't think they're going to offer powers of attorney or the statutory healthcare documents. No, I would be somewhat surprised if they did. If they do, and it looks okay, and the students are all right with it, it's okay. But I don't think so.
Are there any other questions? Okay.
All right.
Jerry, this was so helpful. And as my daughter turned 18 yesterday, we will be making
Oh,
an
happy
appointment with
birthday.
you soon.
Congratulations and happy birthday.
Yeah. Thanks so much for your time and
Of course.
all this information. It's
No, I mean, I really, having children gone through this too, and having been through it myself, I like doing it. This is, I think, my fifth or sixth year doing this now. So it's my pleasure, and I'll be here to answer any questions if anyone has any follow-ups, beyond this. It's fine. Just give us a holler. Okay.
right. Will do.
All right, folks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great night, everyone.
And I think this completes our final senior parent meeting. It's been fun. Thanks all for
Thank
coming.
you.